Welcome to Real Estate and Murder, a podcast about real estate and murder.
I am Amy Brockbank.
And I am Sarah Brager. We are both licensed real estate agents in the state of Utah who have a common fascination with true crime.
We are here to tell you stories of murder amongst the real estate community. It might be an agent, it might be a client, it might be an undetected serial killer.
When it comes to real estate crimes, some are predators and some are prey.
We just want to issue a trigger warning. The content of these cases can be difficult to hear from time to time, and please listen with care. All right, guys, welcome back.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Sarah.
I just thought of something kind of funny as we're recording these episodes. I often find myself saying, like at the end of part one, like, oh, I'll talk to you in just a minute, or we'll be back and we'll tell you all about it. And then a week goes by. So we're talking about this, but our listeners have had to wait a little while to hear part two of the disappearance and death of Crystal McDowell.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Here we are.
And we left part one on quite the cliffhanger.
Yes.
Which was that both of the men that have been in romantic relationships with Crystal recently were suspects in her disappearance. Early suspects. One is her ex-husband, Steve McDowell, and the other is her current boyfriend, Paul Hargrave. And they have both epically failed their polygraph tests.
Yes.
So police are seriously...
They can't narrow down, which, I mean,
can't.
There's some controversy with polygraphs because they're
absolutely
not accurate and, you know, all the things.
Well, they're not admissible in court.
Yeah.
So they can't be admitted as evidence. However, we do see this all the time in the true crime conversation that police use the polygraph as sort of a intimidation tactic, right?
Well, and these officers fully admit, like, we can take that data and we can either, you know, like, go with the suspect, like, okay, like, they really don't know, like, maybe we'll go down this road for a minute, because it kind of, they're limited on resources. And so they're like, if we can change a direction based on, you know, something, but in this case, it
didn't help.
Yeah, it just gave them more questions.
So, Amy, I have a question for you. If you were ever arrested for murder, which is a possibility.
I mean, what? You say that? I'm not a violent person. And
I mean, who is until the second it happens? No, I'm just saying, and unfortunately we see people that are innocent being arrested for, you know, without even knowing what's going on. But okay, either way, it's a hypothetical question. Would you or would you not take a polygraph if you were asked?
You know, I have thought about this. I would fail a polygraph test even right now. Like, is your name Amy? Like, I would be like, I don't, you know, question one, like, done. My nerves would be so high anyway, but I have often thought about this, and when I watch videos and documentaries of people that, you know, we know are guilty that have you know, been serial killers or whatever, and we're watching their police interviews or whatever. I mean, truthfully, I hope this doesn't come back to be like, oh, we're going to play this in court
someday.
Yeah, premeditation. No, I would hire a lawyer, and I would go off what my lawyer would say. Like, I know that sounds weird, but...
It doesn't.
But usually, like, if my spouse was killed, of course, you're the first person, same with you, you know, your spouse is killed, like, the first suspect is going to be the person that lives with them, is married with them, in their home. Like, that's just statistically, like,
how it goes.
And they have to eliminate you. But also, too, I'm terrible with my words, and I can find myself being, like, tripped up in a place. I thought you said that, you know, you went to the gas station today. Well, I went to the gas station sometime this week. Like, I don't know when I was there. Like, you know, I just feel like I would be a mess.
Yeah, and it's funny because we've actually talked about this before. I wanted to see if your answer was any different.
We talked about this with Anna Walsh because my search history, like, I have Googled some crazy stuff for this podcast.
Yep, we absolutely have. Very interesting. I mean, my opinion, always lawyer up immediately, but that's another subject. I just was curious what you would say.
Would you?
Because one of these men are guilty and one of these men is not guilty, but they both failed. It's so interesting. Would I? Absolutely not. No, I would not.
Yeah.
I would not.
If they were asking for DNA evidence, like I would 100%, like, yeah, take my DNA.
I mean, really, honestly, as soon as a police officer shows up and asks you any question more than like, hey, how are you doing today? Like, oh my gosh, lawyer. And we can talk about that maybe more.
Okay, I have a story.
Do it.
Do you want me to share it? We can cut this out if we don't want it. We have an alarm in our house, and Sunday morning, a few years ago, we're cooking breakfast before we go to, church or whatever, and our alarm, like, we had burnt our breakfast, and we didn't get it turned off in time. Anyway, the company that we were with at the time, like, immediately sent out, and now it's different because everybody has false alarm, so they wait to kind of send out police, firefighters,
right,
whatever. Anyway,
they check in with you first.
Yeah. It's our smoke alarm that's like going off, and it's like all of these alarms going off. And we're trying to air out the house. Well, all of a sudden, 2 fire trucks pull up to our house.
Oh no.
And police, and they all get out. There's got to be like 7 or 8 firefighters that are trying to like come in to like bless their hearts because our house is burning down, they think, but no, it's just our breakfast. And I was so nervous. Like, they're firefighters, they're there to help, like, whatever. I end up saying as they're coming into the house, as I'm trying to say, like, we're fine, I'm like, do you guys want something to eat? Like, we don't have anything to eat.
We burnt it, and that's why you're here.
Yeah. That's Amy. How nervous I am when, like, a crisis happens.
Knowing you the way I do now, that tracks. That absolutely tracks. How nice of you. That's so nice.
We had some burnt grapes.
But come on, did you burn grapes?
Crepes.
Oh, I think so. Grapes. Okay. Immediately ask for a lawyer, especially you. Especially you. So both of these men have failed the polygraph test, which does not help the police at all. But of course, they have to keep, we got to keep investigating. So the detectives that are called in, actually Texas Rangers were called in, which Texas Rangers are supposed to be the elite, the top of the top detectives, right? They're all called in. They're working on this. Meanwhile, Hurricane Harvey is making landfall. There's tons of flooding, rainfall everywhere. Homes are being destroyed, which makes it very difficult to find a missing person.
Yeah, and this area got a lot of water. I had a friend that was in Texas during this time, and she has a picture of her son in the street with
up to his knees.
Yeah.
You showed me.
Yeah, it's like his waist, like he was just, and that was during the calm part, after the waters had kind of receded. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But of course, the detectives have to continue moving forward on the investigative part. And so now they're going to start speaking to her family. And her family is very involved already at this point. Cousins, loved ones, they're already actively on a social media campaign, posting pictures of Crystal, posting pictures of her car and her license plate, because they're both missing.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get any type of engagement. Crystal's sweet, lovely cousin, Jade Cherry, is featured on the Dateline episode, which was one of both of our sources, and in other sources as well. She has an aunt that actively speaks about the case. And so they're working so hard because they're very limited in what they can do out in the storm, as well as having to take care of their own personal crises at home. And so, but the family is actively trying to help with the investigation. And we know at this point, 4 days later, right, on the 29th?
On the 29th, it's actually a friend of Crystal's who's driving around, spots her car in the parking lot of a Motel 6,
yep.
8? I didn't know what the number was.
It's a Motel 6, and it's 2017.
Yeah.
So this friend calls the cousin, and had taken a picture and said, I found Crystal's car.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of immediately has that feeling of like, no, or can it be? Or is she there? And
it's just kind of weird, the area that it's in.
Yeah, no reason for it to be there.
Yeah, so they're not sure if she's at the motel for some reason because, again, keep in mind, she was living with Steve, but as the family's kind of hearing different things, and we can get into this too, about Steve's past, history with her and whatever, they're telling Crystal, like, maybe this isn't the best environment. You're seeing this other guy. Like, maybe you should go and rent a place or stay somewhere else. Or so I think maybe initially they kind of thought, okay, this is a weird place for her to stay during a hurricane, even, and not talk to anybody, but maybe she's there. But that's not even the weirdest part with her car being found.
It's definitely not. I mean, the car's reported. The family calls the police and lets them know. We've got detectives and Texas Rangers work in this case. And they go immediately to find the vehicle, investigate it, and the vehicle is unlocked, and the keys are in the car.
Yeah, so it's unlocked. The keys are in the ignition, but it's also like in a spot where they can't actually get in or get it out because it's a flooded area.
Right.
So they actually have to tow it out.
Right.
But
which is why it sat there for so many days without anyone seeing it. It couldn't be identified, covered in water.
Yeah.
Which it was almost up to or past the license plate. I saw some pictures.
Yeah.
So it sat there without identification because it really couldn't be seen at that point.
Which is crazy because then police are now asking the question, okay, wait a minute. We initially thought, okay, yes, her car's found. Maybe she's in this area, but why would she leave her keys inside?
Of course.
The unlocked car. Like, it wasn't like it was locked and she accidentally left her keys in there and now they're
and went around foot.
Yeah.
But they don't know yet. So, Amy, I actually want to fast forward you for just a minute here. Just a minute to September 5th. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this part and then go back to the lead up to it. But it's Tuesday, September 5th. The skies have cleared and a lot of the water has moved out of the area. And so an actual physical on-foot search for Crystal is going to start at this point. She's already been missing for 11 days. But rescue crews are able to go out on foot now. And so...
Well, on the 5th, it would be 10. No, there's 21 days on it.
Yeah. So, right. So an organization called Texas EquiSearch gets involved. And are you familiar with Texas EquiSearch?
No.
Okay. This is going to be our Surprise Amy segment. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I do want to tell you about it because I was pretty sure you didn't know about it. I think I've asked you briefly about them before, but if you aren't familiar with it, Texas EquiSearch is an incredible organization that deserves to be recognized every time they're involved in a case. So, which is actually often. So this organization is actually led by a man named Tim Miller. And he is the father of a young woman who went missing and was found murdered long time ago. And so, and maybe we can tell that story someday also, but, as oftentimes parents of missing and murdered children or family members they want to be involved in change some way. And so he founded this organization called EquiSearch. It is a nonprofit volunteer organization that literally goes out on foot to help search for missing people. And a lot of times are often using horses to do so.
Okay. So,
and this organization has grown significantly and it's a large organization now. And searches, as of today, present time, include everything from ground on foot searchers is a weird word, but searchers, volunteers, sonar, ground penetrating radar, boats, aircrafts, drones, and ATVs. And many law enforcement agencies across the United States call on this organization to ask for help because it is all volunteer. And the Surprise Amy segment, or part of this, is, did you know that you can join Texas EquiSearch? Just join and go look for missing people.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So you'll see them, pay attention because you'll see them pop up in storylines all the time in the true crime world. And many a times as I'm watching or listening to stories, it crosses my mind to be like, someday I would absolutely do that.
Huh.
Yeah. So Texas EquiSearch has assisted in thousands of cases.
Interesting.
Throughout the U.S. and now even abroad. It's an amazing organization. So huge shout out and thank you to Tim Miller, the volunteers. Hopefully someday I get to join and help do something like that. Because if you think about when someone is missing and either not yet or is presumed dead, the panic and the fear that the family or loved ones must feel, And to know that strangers, volunteers will show up and help, it just has to be an amazing feeling, right?
Yeah.
But Texas EquiSearch is now showing up to help search for Crystal McDowell, and over 100 volunteers show up.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I mean, right
amazing.
after the hurricane, like, that's amazing.
Yeah, where volunteers are needed everywhere.
Yeah.
So many people show up to help look on foot.
Oh, really, honestly, the DA said that during this time, like, police officers were trying to find, and all of, like, you know, their departments, and they had homes that were flooded, and they had things that were happening. And so, I mean, you really see a community effort looking for someone, even though other people are going through something bad too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so now I want to introduce our audience to a major player in this story, which is the prosecutor, Cheryl. And she's featured on Dateline, on the Dateline episode and others, I'm sure. And I have seen her name pop up in multiple articles and resources.
Yeah, it's the DA Cheryl Leake.
Yes, Cheryl Leake is quite a character. A woman that, as I'm watching her interview, I feel like I would be very good friends with. And if she didn't want to be friends with me, that's totally understandable. But I want to be her friend. She is a sharp, clear-cut, like, she's an incredible prosecutor who has worked to advocate for many women and children on cases where she practices law in Texas. So she is quite the character. And she is joining the effort along with the Texas Rangers and the detectives to find Crystal, but also to start identifying and working on suspects, right?
Yeah.
So she's here. They've got 2 good suspects so far. And her opinion immediately is cut and dry. She immediately is like, husband did it. Not even interested in anyone else. Husband did it. However, of course, you have to still go through the investigation process.
Well, the sheriff's office is really leaning towards Paul.
They are, because of the way that the unusual way that he's responding. Now, we do say that it's unfair, it's not okay to kind of try and use someone's reactions or behaviors to identify them as being potentially involved. But one thing that really triggered and bothered the police that Paul did that was really unusual is he released the home footage of Crystal leaving his home and getting into her vehicle. She's carrying her shoes. She gets into her car and pulls away on the morning of the 25th, around 7 a.m. He releases that footage to the media.
Yeah, he gave it to a media personnel who came to his door to ask about Crystal and the search efforts, because the search efforts actually began on September 2nd. But
right.
And he had been interviewed at that time by police more than once and never told them that he had video surveillance of her leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the police saw it on the news when he released it to the media.
Which really upset the detectives and the police.
Because he's withholding evidence, and we could have been so much further in the investigation. Yeah, there's a whole hoopla.
Absolutely. So they're very bothered by this. But my best friend Cheryl is like, doesn't matter. Doesn't bother me that he did that. Like, she's steadfast, right? Like, she just thinks it makes sense that he just wants to get it out there. Maybe people will be able to help identify. But there's just kind of discord. There's just back and forth between these really good suspects.
Well, and he had told police that he had purchased a ticket for Crystal to come to Belgium with him in September, and that they were going to leave because he had to go there for work. And she was really excited about taking this trip. They were going to go on this cruise together later with her kids. So they're kind of like, he was like, why would I want to kill her? Like, we've got all these things that are going. And the police are still like, well, you failed a polygraph. You are withholding evidence and a missing persons. And
police they want to, I mean, you're always looking for motive, of course, but, they say, well, Paul could just as likely have motive because his girlfriend that he wants all to himself is still living with her ex-husband. Maybe they got into a fight about it. But, Amy, we know that there's actually a third suspect.
I was just going to say that because Uncle Jeff, who calls and reports her missing, police are very suspicious of him because they feel like he's over-emotional. Now, granted, the police don't know that Uncle Jeff actually helped raise Crystal. He was one of the ones, like, she was living with her grandparents and different people, but he primarily raised her too. But when she was missing, he brought a bunch of people over to her townhome with him. As our audience may remember from last episode, we had said that it was under construction, but he actually brought in people to see if maybe there was clues in there. So he brings in a bunch of people to be like, okay, like, look for evidence. Well, guess what we know? It could have, been a crime scene contamination from the police, because the police don't know if she was there. They don't know where she's been. Now, all of a sudden, you have a bunch of people that are in and out of a place where someone is missing, but
interesting,
it could be something. And so that raises flags for them. And then he hired a private investigator. Now, I'm actually pro Uncle Jeff. Like, good for him. Because it's in the middle of a hurricane. He doesn't really know. Like, I'm sure I would be sitting there thinking, I don't know how much the police are going to be able to focus on this case. I'm going to have to, like, get involved and help find my loved one.
Sure.
Like, I think that's maybe where he was going with it, but I don't know. But anyway, he hired a private investigator, and that investigator ended up interfering with the police investigation.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure Uncle Jeff was trying to be helpful, but it's perceived by the police that he has something to hide. He's too emotional. He's contaminating evidence.
Yeah. And I guess in all reality, we do have to appreciate that the detectives working the case wanted to look at all options instead of pigeonholing one person or the other.
In a lot of investigations, we hear how they hone in on one suspect.
So, I mean, it's got to be tough to be missing a family member and you love them so much and you're just hurting and you're stressed and you're worried and then be pegged as a suspect. But I do actually, in all reality, appreciate that they kept their mind open to other possibilities. So, but we've got 3 potential suspects at this point, at least that we hear of commonly in the story. There may have been others we don't know. But now her vehicle has been found, right? It's been hauled away, and the detectives have to figure out why her vehicle was there. And so they actually go back to the local businesses surrounding that Motel 6 and ask for any footage that they may have so that they can start to narrow down when Crystal got there and parked her vehicle. Did she get to another vehicle with someone else? Did she walk away on foot? They've got to figure this out. And a gas station that is directly across the street or across like the parking lot area from the Motel 6 submits their footage. And Amy, what do they see on the footage on the morning of August? We're struggling with dates in this episode.
It's okay.
On the morning of August 26th, what do they see at the gas station?
So I don't know if it was August 26th that they see this footage.
No. The footage was on that August 26th.
Okay. So they see Steve pulling up to the gas station in his, I believe he had a Mustang.
Yep,
car.
a Shelby Mustang.
And he pulls in like you'd pull in to pump gas, but he doesn't actually get any gas. And he throws away something in the garbage. And the DA describes it as odd because he is in the trash, but he's up to like above his elbow, like pushing something down into the trash. And they're like, that's weird. But the whole time he's there on video surveillance, he's off looking across from his car to what is then ends up being the parking lot where Crystal's car is found. And he's just staring at the spot the whole time he's there.
Which, at that point, he would have, you would think, seen her car and been like, oh my gosh, I know where her vehicle is.
Yeah.
I mean, she hadn't been reported missing at that point. But detectives actually note, as they're reviewing this footage, hours and hours, they say, of footage from these different businesses, that this very kind of specific blue Shelby Mustang pulls in, and they're immediately like, oh, that looks exactly like the vehicle we saw at Steve McDowell's home. Then they see him get out of the vehicle. All this stuff is happening kind of, and they're watching this footage in live time.
And keep in mind, it's like a week later that they're getting this footage.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, not quite a week, but it's within that time frame.
Yeah.
So they go back to the gas station to try to see, like, okay, what was in this garbage that he pushed down. But Hurricane Harvey had come through. The rising floodwaters, anything that was in the garbage can has since floated away.
Oh, for sure.
And so there isn't anything to retrieve. And they're actually super frustrated because, again, it's like they feel like for every 2 steps forward they get 10 steps back. You know, like, oh, we've got this break. Okay, just kidding. We don't have it.
Right. Yeah, and again, like this is all happening so fast, which is great, but I just wonder what it's like to be moving through these facts that they're finding so quickly. However, the detectives know, they remember that the morning, after they'd been interviewing Steve, of course, and Paul, but we'll get to that in a minute. They'd been interviewing Steve, and he had said that he actually had an alibi for that morning, right?
He did have a gas receipt, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, they identify him in the video. But that his alibi that morning was actually that he was at Walmart getting supplies.
Oh, that's right.
So the detectives are like, okay, that's odd because now we're seeing Steve on camera in the same or similar vicinity of where
and this
the
is
vehicle
not
was.
near their house. This was like a couple miles away from where they are. And so...
But close to a Walmart.
Yes. So they go to that Walmart that's there.
Like right across the road, like I heard it references across the road or across the freeway. Like,
yeah,
it's in eyesight though. It's in eyesight.
Why don't you tell the audience what happens at the Walmart?
So they go pull the footage over there because this is Steve's alibi, and now he's showed up on camera, or who they believe to be Steve. I'm sure at this point they're using the word allegedly. Anyway, they find footage of Steve. Or again, at this point I'm saying allegedly, but entering the Walmart and purchasing only one thing.
He buys 3 things.
Only purchasing 3 things. One of which is, oh yeah, you're right. One of which is a bicycle.
Yeah.
Which he didn't mention that his alibi was that he went to buy a bike. And who buys a bike in a hurricane?
And it's not an adult bike. It's a kid-sized bike, which when they searched his house, they saw in the garage, but they thought like, okay, like maybe that's for one of the kids.
Mm-hmm. So he buys this bike and it has kind of unique markings, a reflector, I believe, and it's seen on camera. And then he also buys cigarettes and is it a Red Bull?
Yeah.
Okay.
And energy drinks. Yeah. Okay. I don't know that it specifically said what.
Come for us, Red Bull, but a murder bought an energy drink. Yeah. It might be yours. So he exits the Walmart on a bicycle, holding a cigarette and an energy drink. And now, of course, this is odd. We got to figure out where he went.
Okay, keep in mind for our audience, it's actually raining. It's not like, we're not talking about like hurricane force winds, but this timestamp for Walmart is like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And so it's raining pretty heavily. It's the morning of the 26th. So
early in the morning.
Missing. Well, the police don't know that she's missing yet, but her family knows that she hasn't been seen for the 25th. She hasn't been seen for 24 hours. And anyway, they have him on surveillance, like going across like the freeway bridge. There's another camera that picks him up in the rain. And they're like, this is so odd because he's a grown man on a kid's bicycle. Like, we're not talking like
holding a cigarette.
5 kids, like 5-year-old kid bicycle. I mean, it's like
5 kids.
Yeah, no. But like in the middle of a hurricane, because the hurricane made landfall at 10 p.m. And so there's still all of the residual rain that's coming. Anyway, it's like, it's so odd. It's so odd.
Well, and if you, as you're listening to this episode, if you're confused about the timelines that we're bouncing around here, I mean, it sounds like we don't know what we're doing either, but the timelines in her storytelling, they do bounce around a lot, which is why Hurricane Harvey was so critical in this case, because it really narrowed down so specifically when and where these things happened. So the prosecutor, Cheryl, my wannabe best friend, meaning I want to be her best friend, not the other way around.
Yeah.
But she and the detectives are like, okay, he's seen, or someone that looks like him is seen leaving the Walmart. Let's ask everywhere we can for footage between the Walmart and their home. And sure enough, there's footage of the man that they believe to be Steve leaving the Walmart and going, off and on, of course, this video catches him. And at some point he arrives home because they know. They go there and they interview him.
Yeah, there's, I think it's I-10. I don't know.
Yeah, the I-10. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a bridge there that had a camera that is seen. He's wearing a jacket with the hood on.
A hoodie, yeah.
And it's zipped up, and he's riding this bike at, the wee hours of the morning.
Which he hadn't told the detectives. He had told them that he went to Walmart to buy supplies, but he hadn't told them about the bike, of course. And I'm just going to say quickly here, I know of several cases off the top of my head where a husband/boyfriend purchases a bicycle and he's seen on footage later on the bicycle in a close proximity to the time of the crime. Stop buying bicycles, guys. Quit it. Stop. So anyway,
I don't know that he was smart enough to think they're going to see that they're going to see that I rode the bicycle home.
My personal opinion, and not an expert, speaking as not an expert, has always really been that people who commit a crime, and we haven't gotten to who it was yet, but I'm just saying, as a suspect that they're looking at, people who commit crimes are probably not, honestly, really in their right mind, and are oftentimes panicking, trying to clean things up as they go, and maybe not making the best decisions. Yeah. Which, thank you for that.
We've all been in situations where it's escalated super quickly, out of control. We'll talk about home improvement projects,
that escalate out of control.
1 minute you're just planning on repainting or changing out some baseboards, and then all of a sudden you're knocking out your entire basement.
Holding your molded sheetrock. Yeah, absolutely. Things escalate.
It just happens. So I think that, I don't know that criminals use their full brains when they're trying to cover up something because everything is escalating so quickly.
Which I'm just going to drop this little breadcrumb right here, and I'm curious what you think about this. If we're watching what looks like at this point to the detectives and to Cheryl, it looks like a messy cover-up or a sloppy cover-up. Does that speak to premeditation or not premeditation?
Yeah, we're going to get back to that with our audience.
We are,
Texas,
right?
We learned a little bit about Texas law in this case.
Yeah.
Neither one of us knew. But I'm going to stop you because I don't know if you know this. I mean, I know you know it. But as the police were doing interviews with family and stuff, Steve had a daughter from a previous relationship.
Krista.
Yeah. She is away attending Texas A&M. And they get her either on the phone. She is in a 48 Hours episode where she talks a lot about her dad and different things in her childhood. And she is very adamant that he would never do this to Crystal. Even Crystal's family is he loved her. He adored her. They talk about how Steve was so in love with Crystal, she could do no wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that he was just almost to the point of obsessive in love with her.
Right.
And he would just follow her.
Right.
And so she is adamant that there is no way her dad could do anything.
At the same time as loving her stepmom and wanting her to be found safe.
Oh, yeah.
Must be so torn between my dad's a suspect in this. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's got to be really, really challenging. But at this point, Cheryl is like, boom, we got him. We got enough. Bring him in. The detectives are like, yep, we're going to drag Steve down here and we're going to interrogate him more. We're going to get to the bottom of all this footage. We're going to confront him with all of this footage.
Now, Steve's story, for our audience, there's text messages, and Steve says that Crystal had told him she was going to go pick up the kids and take them to Dallas to wait out the storm, and that she never showed up, is what Steve's telling the detectives. So in Steve's mind, something has happened, and he just was like, I don't know what she decided to do. I don't know if she went to Dallas without the kids. He's just I don't know what to tell you. And then he keeps showing the detectives text messages and different things.
Right. I just want to point out here really quickly that one of the Texas Rangers very involved in this case, who did a lot of really good work, is named Detective Jeter. Not like Jeter the Yankee, but
Derek.
Yeah. His name is actually Stephen Jeter. But, they are really, at this point, really targeting Steve. They've still got Paul on the back burner, ready to roll as another suspect. But kind of at this point in the discussions, I guess we'll call them interrogations with Steve McDowell, things start to really kind of fall apart. He starts to sort of emotionally start to break down. Like he's not kind of staying consistent in his story. He's crying. He's getting emotional. And so they're going to hone in even more now. They're going to really pressure him. And Cheryl, again, the prosecutor who does prosecute this case, is like, go get him hard. We're hard at this point.
Well, there's some hesitation with the police for just a little bit because on March 20th in 2017, Crystal had called the police after Steve had made some threats to hurt himself and to hurt their children. Mm-hmm. And that Steve had then taken the children and hadn't dropped them off at school.
Right.
And was actually like missing for a period of time. And then when he was actually found and the kids were found unharmed, Crystal decided not to press charges. Now, keep in mind that it's March 20th. She ends up, I believe, filing for divorce in April, and their divorce is final by June of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And so police are looking at this as they're getting kind of some pressure to kind of hone in and go after him. He is still living in the house with his two children,
yep,
whom he has threatened to hurt.
Mm-hmm. And of course, yeah, so to your point, like they want to be very cautious about how they approach him because they don't want anything to set him off, have him leave and go hurt his family even more, which must be scary. And actually these detectives and Cheryl both, publicly speak about how nervous and uncomfortable it was and how scary it was to kind of make the decision about how to handle interrogating Steve and getting the answer out of him, because they do believe at this point that he's their primo suspect. They believe that he has killed Crystal and they want to move forward with the prosecution, but they don't have a body yet. So they have one goal right now, and that's to get Steve to reveal, in fact, to confirm that he did kill Crystal and reveal where her body is. And so they have to make a decision here. And Prosecutor Cheryl actually reaches out. She calls an old schoolmate of hers for help. And that schoolmate is Cindy, who is Crystal's aunt, and says, this is the situation going on. We're extremely concerned about the welfare of, the children primarily, of course, but of Steve also. If he's a suspect, we got to know where Crystal is before or if anything ever happened to Steve. And so Aunt Cindy actually straps herself with her concealed carry and goes to stay with the family at Steve's house under the guise to Steve that she's helping with the children.
Yeah, so she's trying to be there and play like, oh, I'm here for you. What can I do for you? I will take the kids to and from school. We're all distraught because Crystal's missing, but we want some normalcy with the kids. Let me help you while you're helping the police, and let's just get some kind of help for you so that you can focus on helping the police find her.
Yeah. So Crystal's family was very involved and actively involved. And at one point, when Cindy's being interviewed, the interviewer asks if she was nervous or afraid at any point, and she looks right at the camera. She goes, "No, I had my gun." Like these very strong women and strong family members, cousin Jade, Prosecutor Cheryl, Aunt Cindy are like, let's get him.
Well, Cindy's recorded in an interview that she had done that she had said that when Crystal was divorcing Steve, Crystal had sat the family down and said, listen, he's the father of my children. We're going to be in each other's lives. This isn't he's a villain. I'm, the angel in this story, but I need you guys to all treat him kindly and accept him and still talk to him because I don't want this to be a weird, awkward thing for my kids.
Yep.
And so they had stayed in his life even after the divorce.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, like, speaks to Crystal's character, that she wanted kind of everyone to be okay. She wanted her kids primarily to have the best and most stable life moving forward, even though she was divorcing Steve. And so she wanted to make sure her family was aware that that was her goal, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Steve is a completely selfish human being, super wrapped up in his feelings, really angry, very bitter, and very jealous. And from here, we're going to kind of hear what happens.
Police are describing him as manipulative.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks. So Steve is actually ready to cave. He is kind of at this point just a sobbing wreck. Like, he's been presented with all the evidence that they have. They're pushing on him, and Cheryl actually is ready to move the children into protective custody because they are very concerned for the children's safety, and they're going to use that against Steve to just make sure that he's clear. Like, you're never going to see your children again unless you tell us where Crystal's body is.
So they let him go home, actually.
They do, the same day. This is all happening at the same time.
This is September 8th for our audience that doesn't know the story. But on September 8th, in the middle of the night, like, he leaves the police station. They've told him that he needs to confess everything in the morning, that they'll be by first thing to come pick him up. So they've given him kind of this timeline, knowing that they don't actually have anything of hard to hold him on. Everything's just circumstantial, right? They don't have the body, but they're hoping that he can help them. And he ends up calling his daughter, and she ends up driving. She left at 3 a.m. She was working, and she got off her shift at 3 a.m. and she drove 2 hours because he told her on the phone, if you don't come now, I'm not going to be able to talk to you. And so she shows up at his house 5 a.m. on September 9th, and he tells her, the police think I did this. And she's like, yeah, but you didn't. You're innocent. And then he makes a comment to her, and he starts giving her like photos and financial statements and keys to his Mustang. And then he makes a comment to her, but what if I did? Mm-hmm. And she said in that moment that she realized that her dad did actually kill her stepmom. He's been lying to everyone. She has fiercely defended him. And it's the saddest thing to watch her. She's on camera doing her interview. And it's the saddest thing to watch her because they ask her, how does this make you feel? And she was like, how do you think this, like, here it is, her dad, who she totally loves and admires because it's her dad. But then she knows, like, he did this horrific thing. And she's caught off guard. She's caught off guard that he actually did this.
Of course.
And then after that kind of happens, she sees the police coming up to the house, and they come to pick up the dad. And it's about 10 a.m. at this point.
Yeah. And, oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
But the detectives actually say that they were very surprised that Steve McDowell opened the front door. Like, he was alive. They were very concerned that they were going to let Steve out of their sights, and he was either going to go on the run, hurt himself in some way, or never talk again. And so they take a breath of fresh air. They take Steve down to the station, start the interviewing again, and Steve confesses that he did kill Crystal. Now, Steve has had the night to think things through and maybe a little while to think things through, but he is going to ask a favor of everybody right now. And he's confessed.
Steve is only thinking of Steve.
Absolutely.
Let's not give Steve any credit.
Absolutely. Here. So Steve says that he will take the detectives to find Crystal's body if they take the death penalty off the table.
Yeah.
So the detectives and Cheryl are faced at this point with weighing their options because they believe, that the hurricane happened, which would have, of course, naturally washed away a lot of evidence. There have been hundreds of volunteers foot searching, family members searching. No one has even come up with a trace of Crystal. And so they decide it is worth it to remove the death penalty off the table if Steve will take them to Crystal's remains. But at this point, they've got to get the confession all taken care of. And Steve tells the story of how he murdered Crystal. Amy, you know how he murdered Crystal, right?
I know how he actually murdered Crystal, but what he says is disgusting.
He says that they were having a passion,
Okay, well, first of all, we should tell our audience that when she left Paul's house, she did arrive at the house with her and Steve. He confronted her. There was a fight because she had spent the night with this boyfriend. He, in his mind, was hoping that they would reconcile at some point, and maybe the cruise was an opportunity for them to get remarried or whatever.
Right.
And so he was so upset that he was going to lose her. And now you can finish.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. I'd kind of forgotten about that in the early story, because we've been both researching this case for quite a while. But earlier on, Steve had actually told the detectives, like, no, me and Crystal are in a great place in our relationship right now. We're going to go on this cruise, and I'm actually going to propose to her again.
Yeah, we're going to get remarried on this cruise. Oh, and then there was another story where he was like, she never came home. Like, I mean, he's kind of been all over the place. Like, but he did admit that she did, in fact, come home that morning on August 25th.
And detectives had noted also previously that this entire time, every time they interviewed and spoke with Steve, he was still wearing his wedding ring.
Yeah.
So he's telling different versions of the story. But, either way, he's confessing that this morning, there is a fight. He confronted Crystal about, being with Paul. And Crystal starts to react to him. And so he puts his arms around her to hold her.
Like a bear hug. And he just hugs her to death.
He hugs her so hard until he realizes accidentally that she's gone limp. Now, Amy, and hopefully our listeners that have listened to previous episodes, where have we heard that before? Where have we heard that method of accidental death before?
I mean, I feel like it's every case. I didn't actually mean to do that. I didn't actually mean to squeeze the life out of someone for 4.5 minutes until they actually die.
Yeah. The bear hug defense. Julia Dee Keller.
Yeah.
If you listened to that case previously.
Our case 7.
Yep. Her ex, who ended her life tragically, told the same story. It was a bear hug. I didn't mean to do it.
Who are these men?
Who are these men buying bicycles and then bear hugging their exes that they just love so much that they accidentally kill them? It's absurd.
I love you.
It's absurd. But at this point, got him. We have a confession and he's ready to take us to the body. So the detectives load him up in the car and Steve leads them directly right to a location off of a road called Needle Point Road.
It's a heavily wooded area. For those that aren't familiar with the area, like heavily wooded.
Which the detectives say we would have never have looked there.
Yeah.
This place was covered in feet of water at the time that she went missing.
Yeah, they said it wasn't even on their radar to even look there because of the location, how much water there was around the time. And unfortunately, when she is found, she's very highly decomposed.
Right.
There's traces of animals.
Yeah.
And so they're not able to determine a cause of death based on how her body is.
Oh, because when you just hug someone to death, there can't be that much evidence. But I would assume that a part of the acceleration of her decomposition is due to the fact that, unfortunately, her body would have been covered in water, off and on, and that would have washed a lot of evidence away. Very graphic, very tragic. And from here on out, if you're not already infuriated, we're going to talk about the trial.
Well, he's charged with murder that same day.
Yep.
He's taken to jail and he's awaiting trial. And he decides, or his lawyer decides, one way or the other, that he's going to claim sudden passion. That's an actual term in Texas.
It's a legal term. And this is just one of the few things that should infuriate anyone listening to this story.
Yeah.
But sudden passion changes the entire premise of not the charges, but the
sentencing.
Yeah.
If you're found guilty of sudden passion, which is what their defense is claiming it was, that he just automatically snapped, he didn't intend to, it was just this passionate event, accidentally killed someone, The max you can get is 20 years, but most people get out in 2.
Well, the minimum is 20, minimum is 2, max is 20. And Prosecutor Cheryl is, in her words, scared, terrified that the jury is going to agree that sudden passion absolutely fits this case, because also in part, like, some of the detectives agree that this is a sudden passion. Now, I never found any note about which detective agreed. I'm just saying, according to Cheryl, some of the detectives agree that sudden passion fits this case.
Well, because they all liked him, or some of them liked him. You know, he was a likable guy. He didn't have a history of violence. You know, they were just this. But as they dig into the case and dig into his personality and how manipulative he is, the prosecution starts to whittle away at this thing.
Right. And I mean, the major game changer about sudden passion is that it eliminates first-degree murder, because it eliminates premeditation.
Yeah.
Sudden passion is saying there was no pre-planning, there was no
It just accidentally
forethought.
happened.
It just happened. I bear hugged you passionately to death. So this is nerve-wracking for the family, the prosecution, right? Everyone is very concerned about how this is going to go.
Yeah, there's a few problems with his sudden passion.
There's a few problems with Steve. Okay.
Yeah.
Steve is human garbage.
Yeah, 100%. But the problems that he has with sudden passion that the prosecution is going to try to relay to the jury is that, one, when it happened, he didn't immediately call 911 and say, oh my gosh, something just happened. I was giving my ex-wife a hug and she just died. And he didn't call 911. In fact, he had said that he had, wrapped her body up and then shoved her inside of garbage bags and then, dumped her body. We know that he dumped her car. We know that he never called it as a missing persons. We know that he lied. So that's one of Steve's problems.
And let's just tell, in case you haven't connected the dots yet, he drove Crystal's Mercedes after removing her body from it, which is so awful. He drove it to the Motel 6, left it unlocked, left the keys in it, hoping someone would steal it.
Car. Yeah.
So he is trying to clean up his mess.
It's 13 miles from their house that he biked. So, I mean, it's no...
With a cigarette.
Yeah. But Steve's biggest problem is his daughter, who was 7 at the time. And this is all in court docs, she testifies that her dad killed her mom.
She testifies at trial.
Trial.
Prosecutor Cheryl was very conscientious. Like, she weighed very carefully this decision to bring in the daughter's testimony. For one thing, you're re-traumatizing a child who has seen a horrible event. And it's risky for so many reasons. But their daughter, who we've decided, we're not gonna name her name or the son's name, because they were minors at the time. But we do want to reverently address that the daughter wants to testify.
Yes, she went in, and was like, no, I need to say, and I'm just gonna read, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What is in the court transcripts? She says that they were arguing about her mom being with another man.
So she's standing in the door. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no. So this is in the morning. They were asleep. The dad thought that she was asleep. The kids were asleep. Crystal comes home. It's about 7 a.m. The little girl wakes up to go to the bathroom. And then she hears that they're arguing. And the master bedroom of this house, Steve had actually moved out of the master bedroom when Crystal had moved in. And so she was staying in this bedroom.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to set this.
No, you're good. You're good. And Crystal said that she was going to take her kids with her. The dad pushed her on the bed and said, this is a quote, "No, you're not," unquote. And then the daughter testifies that he puts his hands on puts her hands on her mom like this, and she demonstrated for the jury by putting her own hands over her nose and her mouth.
Oh, it's just so awful.
The daughter continued, quote, and she tried to put her hands up and her feet up so Dad wouldn't have so much weight on her. And then he glanced at me, really mad at me. And then Mom glanced at me and tried to say help. And then when he was done, he told me to go to my room and don't tell anyone.
This is heartbreaking.
It's so horrific. It's so horrific. And honestly, like he's a dirtbag for killing the mom of his kids anyway, but for doing it in front of his daughter and then just telling her to like go back to bed, don't tell anyone, like it just to do that in front of your kid, like she will have that memory of her dad killing her mom like forever.
It's horrific. I mean, it's like beyond selfish. I don't even know the word besides evil.
Yeah.
For what he did, how he tried to pressure his child and then tried to do this cleanup work in a way that he would never get caught and then present himself as this great husband that was so in love with her. Like, what an absolute sack of trash. We've agreed not to swear on this podcast as much as possible, but what a horrible human being.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, she's up there, obviously a very emotional day in court to have this little girl come. I'm sure if I were in the jury, like I would just be crying. Like it would be so sad.
Yeah.
Steve decides to testify.
Of course he does.
At his trial. Mm-hmm. And he gives an entirely different story. Basically tries to say that his kid is lying. And he said that he was only trying to give her a hug so they would stop fighting. And he put her in a bear hold. And before he knew it, she went limp and fell. And the police confession tapes show him describing him choking her from behind. So police are like, no, he actually kind of put her in a headlock to actually finalize it. The daughter says that he put his weight and his hands over her face and nose and kind of smothered her like that to kind of disable her. And then I'm sure he ended up choking her that way, which there would have been maybe potential evidence as far as we know. Like there's always that neck bone that's usually broke if someone is strangled in some sort of fashion. But because of the way the body was discovered, that there was just no way to tell how she died. But anyway, he ended up being found guilty of first-degree murder.
Yeah, that's all of that is good enough for the jury to say,
yeah,
this is not going to be dismissed as sudden passion. You know, we're going to sentence or find this man guilty and hope that he recommend that he's sentenced to the max. Understanding that the death penalty is off the table, but...
Yeah, he is eligible for parole in 2042.
Well, he was sentenced to 50 years. Let's say that first.
Yeah.
He was sentenced to 50 years.
So he's eligible for parole in 2042, and he is serving his sentence in H.H. Cofield Unit in Anderson County in Tennessee Calling, Texas.
That was so specific.
I know. I looked.
You have a cell number for all of our listeners.
I actually went to the corrections office.
I bet.
And tried to look him up. In Utah, you can look up like
inmates,
and you can see like their last picture taken, and you can see kind of details in there. Texas, their information is a little bit more private than in Utah, but anyway, I did go to the website. It does confirm that he's actually there and
hopefully miserable and rotting.
I mean, one could only hope.
Whew. That part of it is so heavy. Like every time I think of a child having to be involved, it's just so tragic. It's so heartbreaking, but what an amazing child to be able and willing to come forward. And not that any child who isn't able to do that is doing anything wrong or not doing the right thing. I'm not saying that at all. Like, let me just be clear.
Yeah.
It seems to me that like the image that I'm getting is that how much like her mother she must have been. Right?
Like fighting for what was right.
Exactly.
Just like, no, absolutely. I want to testify, you know? I mean, he's just, I cannot, this case is so horrific on so many levels, but the fact that his child saw him kill the mom was just ridiculous.
Well, and this case is the absolute perfect example of, if I can't have her, nobody can.
Yeah.
Right. Which is such a selfish motive. It really is.
Well, it goes into at least my takeaway of, because we have friends that have been in bad relationships. We have friends that have been divorced. We have all these different things. And I think everybody who's in a situation like that always thinks like, no, that's not going to be me. Or, no, like, it was a bad moment, or whatever it is. But unfortunately, domestic violence takes so much. It happens very quickly. It needs to be taken more serious as far as family members and friends and even ourselves, when we're in a situation, to step back and just be like, you know what? No, this is a really big red flag. Like, I really could end up being a statistic. And unfortunately, Crystal ended up being a statistic of domestic violence because, there was red flags with how possessive, manipulative, all these things throughout their marriage that, there's some good qualities that people wanted to see through, but unfortunately, it ended her life.
Right. And when there are children involved, it seems like so often there's even more of a desire, a push to try to not villainize the partner that is being violent or possessive or showing these red flags, to want to see the best in them because he's, the parent of my child, regardless of what gender, but he's the parent of my child, and he would never, she would never, they would never, right?
Yeah.
And it is so unfortunate that Crystal lost her life. And, my takeaway, I'm going to just take a slightly different take on my takeaway. I just want to say, thinking back about what we know, the way that Crystal's family and friends talk about her as being so cheerful and loving and successful. And she has this beautiful smile in her photos, especially with her children. Being murdered is a manner of death in which I believe the victim never sees coming, right?
Yeah.
And I hope, my dream would be that it never ever happens to anyone ever again, but it's probably happening right now. Statistically, it's happening right now as we speak. And so my takeaway looking back at this story is, live your best life. Crystal wanted to be a flight attendant and see the world, and she was beloved at that. She was planning a trip to Belgium. She was planning a cruise with her children. She was literally seeing the world. She was loving her career. She was, she had active plans. We know she had plans. She was dating and going out to dinner and going to fights and activities and events with her friends or her family. Like, live your life, soak up every moment, do everything that you want to do, check off your to-do list, your bucket list, if you will. Not because I'm not suggesting that our listeners, should always see yourself as a potential murder victim, but death in some way will always come. And so, live your life to the absolute fullest that you possibly can and enjoy what you can with your family and your loved ones and your friends, because you really don't know at any minute when the opportunities to do those things could be gone for whatever reason, for whatever manner of death. I'm just saying, live your life to the absolute fullest.
Yeah. I think that's perfect takeaway.
So Crystal was a beautiful mother, successful realtor, amazing family member, friend, it seems like, and it's so tragic that she lost her life. Her children are actually being raised with a good family friend who is taking such good care of them, it sounds like, is really just loving on those children, and wish the best for them and for, all the victims of Hurricane Harvey and the current hurricanes that are going on. And man, really, what else do you say?
Yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy.
It is. All right, well, there's another case going down on the books. So, Amy,
I know.
let's get back to real estate.
Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.